Hello and welcome to a celluloid-infused instalment of Consoletronix, where I'll be looking at the video games that followed in the wake of the bombs and blockbusters from the decade of excess and truly awful fashion, the 1980s, where greed was good and shoulders were padded, and the then new craze among kids, video games, very quickly replaced the comics and toys of previous decades as the dominant entertainment medium for a generation. So join me in looking at video games based on 80s movies, Part 1.
E.T. Phone Home.
And now, Steven Spielberg brings us E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
One of the biggest box office hits of its day and the first movie I was taken to the cinema to see as a toddler. Steven Spielberg really was the golden boy of Hollywood at this time, having a string of high-profile hits already under his belt such as Jaws, Close Encounters and Raiders of the Lost Ark, but E.T. was just on a whole new level. And while they would tinker with it in future re-releases by editing out guns and references to terrorists, the fact that they never lessened this movie's impact with sequels is testament to just how much it meant to all involved.
I'll be right here.
You all thought I was going to look at the infamous Atari 2600 version, didn't you? Well, if it's any consolation, this 20th anniversary PS1 release from 2002 isn't much better. Collect flowers and solve insultingly simple puzzles to progress. One for the younger fans of the homesick extraterrestrial.
All I have in this world is my balls and my word, and I don't break them for no one. Do you understand?
Okay, so what do you call yourself? Como se llama?
Antonio Montana.
And we go from perhaps one of the greatest children's movies of all time to what comes ever so close to being one of the greatest movies of all time, Scarface. Al Pacino turns in a career-defining performance as Cuban drug lord Tony Montana. But unlike E.T., Scarface, which is itself a remake, will soon be ground up and emasculated by the PC New Hollywood machine, with a soulless new reimagining which has already missed its announced 2018 release and has been pushed back again for more rewrites and shootings of new scenes. But no matter how much you polish a lump of shit, it will still be shit.
Say hello to my little friend!
The sixth generation of gaming saw a spree of movie tie-in games that were based on cult movies from the 80s and 90s. We had games of Reservoir Dogs, The Warriors, and even The Godfather. And joining this throng of licensed nostalgia bait was Scarface, The World Is Yours in 2006. A sequel set after the events of the film and very much riding the coattails of Grand Theft Auto, but a title I happily sunk many hours into.
Hello, cutie pie. One of us is in deep trouble.
Or play the running man.
On your mark! I'll be back. Go!
We slip down a couple of divisions in the best movies of all time category to look at a 1987 sci-fi actioner starring one of the biggest names at the box office of the time, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Here thrust into a violent future sport where survival is the name of the game, and while hardly the Austrian Oak's most fondly remembered or quotable movie of the era, it would go on to influence a lot of future video game classics, such as Speedball and Smash TV.
But I hope you leave enough room for my fist, because I'm going to ram it into your stomach and break your goddamn spine! Ah!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, start.
I'll be back.
Don't be fooled by the admittedly rather snazzy opening to this game of the film brought to us by Grandstand, whoever they are. This is a new low as far as I'm concerned, because like many movie-based games before and after it, it looked slick and had all the hype a game could ask for, but its awkward controls and fiddly movement ruin what could have been and maybe should have been an enjoyable action platformer.
Everything comes to he who waits.
The Masters of the Universe toy line was originally a line of action figures based on Arnold Schwarzenegger's breakout film Conan the Barbarian, but after a bit of legal wrangling, Mattel chose to release the figures under their own banner, and the result was a franchise that has far eclipsed Conan's, and in 1987 Cannon Group would bring it to the big screen in a goofy interpretation of Eternia's favourite son and his muscle-bound adventures, with Ivan Drago in the title role. Well, as corny as the movie was, it at least remembered that He-Man is a sword-wielding barbarian, because the game is a bloody shoot-'em-up, developed by Gremlin Graphics, the same company responsible for another disappointing game based on popular 80s cartoon Mask. But with rumours rife of an all-new He-Man film in the works, maybe long-term fans will finally get to see their childhood hero in something worth getting excited about. But considering Hollywood's track record, I wouldn't hold my breath.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
Ghosts.
Hello, Ghostbusters.
They're real.
You do?
They're mean.
You have?
They're here.
The quintessential 80s film and pop culture powerhouse that over 30 years on still captivates and excites, despite Hollywood's best efforts to turn it into a feminist vehicle in 2016. But the original movie and its iconic cast may have turned out very different had Harold Ramis not heavily rewritten Dan Aykroyd's original script and James Belushi lived to play Peter Venkman as Aykroyd originally wanted. But what ifs aside, this is still the benchmark that all future blockbusters are measured by.
Hey! Let's show this prehistoric bitch how we do things downtown.
When it comes to games based on the 80s institution of Ghostbusters, I had a lot to choose from, but the 2009 release of Ghostbusters the video game, featuring the voice talent of the original cast including Bill Murray, who is the one man who prevented there ever being a Ghostbusters 3 in the 90s and early 2000s, was, for a fan like myself, a dream come true. As Aykroyd said himself, it's as close to the third movie as you're ever likely to see.
This is where the law stops, and I start.
Society is breeding a new kind of criminal. It's also breeding a new kind of cop. Meet Cobra. He does the job nobody wants.
We had to have a look in on Schwarzenegger's main rival to his action movie throne, and while best remembered for his Rocky and Rambo movies and their many sequels, Sylvester Stallone would also shit out many cheesy and over-the-top action offerings at this time. But few remember 1986's Cobra, which is based on Stallone's rejected script for the first Beverly Hills Cop movie, which he auditioned for.
Cobra. You're a disease, and I'm the cure.
Well, this one surprised me. The game is actually a pretty decent platform shooter, with you controlling Stallone through some nutty levels, shooting everything that moves. Hard as Rocky Balboa, but well worth checking out.
Come with me if you want to live.
It will have only one purpose: to return to the present and prevent the future. This weapon will be called the Terminator.
I may have only been a wee slip of a lad when this one came out, but its legacy as one of the greatest sci-fi action films of all time ensures that long after I'm gone, this movie will still be watched, enjoyed and studied as a work of art. And while many consider the sequel T2 Judgment Day superior, that takes nothing away from the greatness of James Cameron's breakout hit.
I'll be back.
Like Ghostbusters, there would be no shortage of Terminator games to choose from, but this time I thought I'd show off one of the few games on this list that I actually owned as a kid, Terminator on the Mega Drive. Ironically, this game only came about because Nintendo had the exclusive rights to Terminator 2, but Sega didn't want to be left out of that lucrative loop, so commissioned ports of the first film, and hey, I'm not complaining.
Yours truly, Elvira, the gal with the enormous ratings.
Here's a superhero with the biggest pair of all.
You looking for me?
There she was, just walking down the street singing.
A lot of you may be wondering why I'm showing off this little known B-movie based on a character who presented classic monster movies on US TV. Well, two reasons. First, it's an underrated comedy featuring a number of familiar faces from the era. Second, the star Elvira has cleavage that if I was Norwegian, I'd be looking to ski down.
Listen, sister, if I want your opinion, I'll beat it out of you.
Hey, I'm Elvira.
While the film may now be almost unheard of outside of fans of cult cinema like myself, in its day it would inspire a number of popular computer games. This is Elvira, the fantasy adventure for the Commodore Amiga, where you have to help Elvira find her impressive magic chest in a perky graphic adventure.
I don't believe it.
That is why you fail.
Now, the creators of the biggest smash hit of all time bring you the next episode in the Star Wars saga, The Empire Strikes Back.
Now, truth be told, I've never been much of a Star Wars fan. The first time I watched the original trilogy in their entirety was with the very first remasterings on VHS in the mid-90s. But rewatching Empire Strikes Back is probably the most fun I had in the process of making this video. Even if I do think Return of the Jedi's better.
No, I am your father.
One of the big reasons for me watching the trilogy back in the 90s was because I became such a big fan of LucasArts' Super Star Wars series on the SNES. And while they are probably best remembered now for their rock-hard and at times unforgiving difficulty, I still think they are an awesome set of 16-bit platformers and proof that not all film tie-ins have to be crap.
Meet me at Omar's. Be ready for me. I'm going after that truck. Oh. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go.
It is protected by forces beyond imagination.
We may have differing opinions on Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars, but I've yet to meet a man who had anything negative to say about this one, the first in the Indiana Jones franchise, Raiders of the Lost Ark, starring Harrison Ford in the lead role, and once again we have the maestro Steven Spielberg behind the camera. Based on the adventure serials of the 40s, but very much shot with modern audiences in mind. Interestingly, the original name of the character was Indiana Smith and had Magnum PI's Tom Selleck set to star, but it was George Lucas who changed the title and gave top billing to Ford in order to ensure he would return to play Han Solo in the upcoming third Star Wars movie that he had yet to sign up to.
There's a big snake in the plane, Chuck! I hate snakes, Chuck!
Despite there being a plethora of indie games across many platforms, I could only find one game based on the original film, and What a game it is! I guess you had to use your imagination quite a bit when playing Atari 2600 games back then, but the more of them I play, the more I think the video game crash of the 80s was a very, very good thing.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
These days we take superhero movies for granted and Batman is guaranteed box office. But back in the late 1980s it was a very different story, with Warner Brothers unsure how to handle the property after decades of the 60s TV show reruns making bats a laughingstock. So they entrusted directorial duties in an untested Tim Burton and cast comedian Michael Keaton in the lead and left them to it. And let's not forget the fury this caused in comic fandom at the time. The result, however, is arguably still the best Batman movie ever made and a template on how to transition superheroes from the pages of a comic to the big screen.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
If you grew up in the beginning of the 90s, chances are you had a copy of Batman on whatever system you owned. And while the NES version is probably the most well known, I thought I'd show some love to the Mega Drive version which I grew up with. It's not the best, as you can probably tell, but it's good.
Can you fly, Bobby?
Clarence, no! We get the best of both worlds. The fastest reflexes modern technology has to offer, onboard computer-assisted memory, and a lifetime of on-the-street law enforcement programming. It is my great pleasure to present to you Robocop.
And for the last film I'm going to look at, I had to make sure it was one of the best the decade had to offer. So of course I chose Robocop. This 1987 slice of sci-fi ultra-violence blew my 10-year-old mind when I saw it for the first time in 1989, and all these years later it still sends a shiver down my spine. But while for much of that time I thought it a modern-day Frankenstein tale, director Paul Verhoeven on the DVD commentary actually said it was based on the life of Jesus, dying for our sins and walking on water at the end. I don't know about that, but I do know this is one of my all-time favourite movies. I'd buy that for $1.
Come quietly or there will be trouble.
This is the police. Drop all your weapons.
While ports of the original Data East arcade that appeared on the computers of the day like Amstrad, Spectrum and Amigas would prove so popular they would remain in the bestseller list for years afterwards, the 2003 Robocop game for PS2, Xbox and GameCube seemed to come and go without much fanfare. But I picked up a copy for my Xbox and enjoyed it. It might not be anywhere near as good as the original film, but when placed alongside the 2014 remake, it's Citizen freaking Kane in comparison. Now I know there are a lot of other high profile films I could have looked at, but don't worry, I will in part 2 coming soon. And who knows, if the video proves popular enough, I may even, in true Hollywood fashion, make it a trilogy. So if you enjoyed watching, then show your support and spread the word. Share the video, drop a like, and let me know your thoughts and experiences of 80s cinema and beyond. So my name's Gray, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. So that's a wrap, and goodbye.